Hmm? A picture? A picture? The drawer was a single picture. He picked it up. It was a photograph of four men. Oh, well, look who it is. Involuntarily, Junpei's eyebrows shot up. He'd seen the three of them before. On the right was a man with a mustache. I just realized the scientist looks a lot like the ninth man. Either he is the ninth man, or he's the father of the ninth man. The same man they'd found murdered in the captain's quarters. Oh, hey, I was right. He'd been wearing the zero bracelet when they'd found him. The second from the left was a man wearing glasses and a doctor's coat. He was the ninth man, the one who'd worn the bracelet number 9. He had gone into door 5 alone and met with an unpleasant end. Finally, the man on the very left, the man with the pinstriped suit. I just realized the guy that Junpei hasn't identified is really fucking tall. Oh man, that's Ace. Yeah, I guess it is. No doubt about it. Seven and Clover had come to peer over Junpei's shoulders. But what did it mean? What was Ace doing in the picture? Perhaps more importantly, why were the ninth man and Cap in it as well? As Junpei looked closer, he noticed the expression on each man's face. Their smiles suggested they were close, at least to some degree, yet Ace was okay with letting a close friend of him die. But why? How? Although I suppose technically he's not his friend. I mean, just works for him, really. Was there some relationship between these four men? Snake's voice broke into Junpei's thoughts. You say Ace is in that picture? Yeah. It doesn't look like it was taken recently, though. Ace, the ninth man, and Cap all look about 10 years younger. Ah, so the ninth man and the man you found in the murdered in the captain's quarters are also on the picture? Yeah. Is there anyone else? Or are there only 3 people in the picture? I'm afraid I can't see. No, there's one more guy. He's got kind of long hair, he looks smart, but a little cold. He's the only one I don't recognize. Snake knit his eyebrows. What's the date on the photograph? It doesn't have one. Did you look at the back? The back? Yes, the reverse, the other side. Junpei flipped the picture over. There it was. To be precise, it wasn't a date, but it was certainly significant. He read it out loud so Snake would not be left in the dark. Praying for the success of the Nonary Project. With Nijisaki Kubota and Musashido. Nonary Project. Nijisaki Kubota. Musashido. Junpei immediately flipped the picture back over. That meant that the 4 men in the picture had run the Nonary game 9 years ago. Only Hongao had not been mentioned on the back, which Junpei felt meant that he had written those words himself. But what surprised Junpei was not this revelation, but the fact that it felt nothing like a revelation. It felt obvious. That their true identities did not come to a surprise was what Junpei found most surprising. Why then? Why wasn't he surprised? Junpei had just discovered that Ace had run the Nonary Project, but he felt no spark of excitement or surprise. Nothing. It's almost as if he'd already known. Well, technically he did. Ah, of course. I understand now. Junpei looked over at Snake. In his own confusion, he had missed the dark look on the other man's face. Ace was the CEO of Cradle Pharmaceuticals. He was the one who invented the game 9 years ago. He was Gentaro Hongu. Ace is Hongu? Even as he asked, Junpei felt as though he had already known. It was as if someone had whispered into his head that yes, of course Ace was Hongu. Yeah, really. I had my suspicions from the beginning. Their voices were familiar. Too familiar to be a coincidence. I could never forget his voice. It was the voice of the devil. I couldn't be sure, though. After all, I had no way to check. I certainly couldn't ask him. Even if I had known, however, I would never have told you. Zero made it quite clear what would happen if I did.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea!
Huh?
I didn't know that Ace was Hongu.
Oh, yes, I suppose you wouldn't have. 9 years ago, you were in Building Q in Nevada. But Hongu was in the Gigantic with us.
I know. That's why I didn't know what Hongu looked like. But why? Why didn't you tell me? I mean, I'm your sister, right? You could have told me.
I'm sorry. I apologize for keeping this from you. But if I told you, Clover, you would have told everyone else. And if you did, then I would have been forced to tell them about what happened 9 years ago. I had to prevent that. Clover and Snake's conversation wasn't of particular interest to Junpei. He still couldn't make sense of the strange feelings of knowledge. He was trying to organize his thoughts when he heard Seven's voice. Hey, Junpei, you think I could borrow that picture for a sec? He had no reason to say no, so Junpei handed the picture over. Seven stared at the picture and began to mutter the 4 names of the project leaders over and over to himself. Hongu, Kubota, Nijisaki, Musashido. His brow furrowed and his face was flushed. Hongu, Kubota, Nijisaki, Musashido. He chanted their names to himself, pacing back and forth across the room. Hongu, Kubota, Nijisaki, Musashido. Seven couldn't have known their names, or shouldn't have known their names. After all, he hadn't been there when Junpei and Snakes had spoken of them in the library. But as Junpei watched him pace, it was clear that he did know them. Hey, Seven, do you... Shut it! Just be quiet! His eyes were red, and Junpei could see sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. I'm this close to remembering! This close! He was sweating heavily now, but his lips were dry. Hongu, Kubota, Nijisaki, Musashido, Cradle Pharmaceutical, Nonary Project. Then he stopped. Seven set down the picture and looked at the red light near his feet. His eyes narrowed. Then suddenly his eyes went wide, and he shot straight up. Shit. What?
What's wrong?
Holy shit. This is nuts. What's nuts? I remember.
Remember what?
Everything. Everything? Yeah, I remember all of it. My memory's back. I remember what happened before I got snatched. Seven's voice was filled with excitement. Shock and excitement had frozen Junpei in place, along with Snake and Clover. Let me tell you what happened. Seven hastily drew a shaking hand across his mouth and began to speak. Like Snake said, Ace is Hongu. From the right, the other 3 are Musashido, Nijisaki, and Kubota. Musashido was the man with the cash. Nijisaki was Hongu's right man, and Kubota developed the actual technical details of the experiment. Realization began to dawn on Junpei, along with a pressing question. How do you know all this? Come on, man, I told you, I finally got my memory back. No, that's not what I mean. I'm trying to ask you why you knew all this stuff in the first place before you forgot it. Seven rubbed the scar on his chin. You really want to know? Of course.
Me too!
Snake was the only one who didn't voice any sort of agreement. It looked to Junpei as if he was simply waiting to see where Seven's sudden recovery might take them. This is gonna take a while. Hell, it'll probably take me a good 3 days to tell you everything.
Well, we don't have 3 days.
Just give us the short version, alright? Short version, huh? The big man pulled off his hat and scratched his head. He made a face and put his hat back on. Alright, fine. I'll give it a shot. No promises, though. Junpei and Clover nodded earnestly. Seven was a lone wolf detective who valued his own code for the rules, doing what was right over what you were told. Oh my god, that makes sense. That's why he has so much knowledge about crime scenes and investigation. That's why, on that fateful day, he'd gone with his gut and gone to the wharf at night on a slim lead. It was 9 years ago. The wharf had been dark and cold and foreboding. At the time, he'd been investigating a spat of kidnappings, all of them children. They had all one thing in common, a history of visits to one particular hospital. The hospital had been under the management of Cradle Pharmaceutical, and Seven's investigation had turned up evidence that Cradle had been involved in the kidnappings. After a little persuasion, he'd managed to finally get a real lead from someone inside Cradle Pharmaceuticals. They told him that night the ship was set to take the children from where they were being held to a large passenger liner docked offshore. Seven had, of course, gone to the wharf. Hidden in the shadows, he searched the harbor until at last he found the ship he was looking for. There were a number of human shapes moving near the ship. Oh, that's before he has scars. They were men in black suits, many of them carrying large bags. The bags... There was something about the way they moved as they were carried. There could be no mistake. They were human beings in those bags. He had moved before he even realized he was going to. Out of the shadows he came, his gun already in hand. He heard the words, "Don't move," but they weren't his. He felt metal touch the back against the back of his head. "Drop your gun," came a cold voice from behind him. "I could kill you right now. It would mean nothing at all. I need only tie an anchor to your feet, and I doubt anyone will see you for perhaps a week or so." "Is that what you'd like? The fish here would be thankful for the meal." With the words, he felt the cold metal thing behind him press against his skull. Slowly, Seven crouched down and laid his gun on the ground. Then suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his neck. A needle. Was it some sort of drug? As he was thinking about that, Seven felt his face hit the cold concrete beneath him. He could feel the chill of it seeping into him. Ugh! Damn it! Shit, my head hurts! Seven woke to find himself lying on a hard floor. He twisted his neck to peer around the room. Where am I? There was a small, shabby bed and a dirty sink. A toilet with no stall or privacy of any sort. As a cop, it was a place Seven had seen all too often. I'm in a cell, huh? Opposite of the toilet was a door set into the wall. Seven struggled to his feet and hobbled toward it. He gave the door a good shove, then another, then tried pulling it. It didn't open. Well, that was about what he'd expected. It wasn't like someone would put him in a cell only to leave it unlocked. He threw himself against the door a few times, but to no avail. I knew it, Seven grumbled to himself as he moved back toward the bed. He sat down. He sat there for a very long time. Just how long he wasn't sure. At last he began to nod off, and had nearly fallen asleep when he was roused by a distant voice. There's... over... It's... 9! The voice was far away. Very far away. Seven couldn't understand what it was saying. Nonetheless, it was a voice, and a high one, most likely a child. Oh, well, I definitely gave it the wrong voice. His eyes shot open. Huh? Oh, oh, wait, that's them. Huh? Oh, here! K-ing! As he listened, he could pick out several different distinct voices. There were at least 5 or 6, possibly more. Where were the voices coming from? He looked around the room frantically. Perhaps at the door? No, that wasn't it. What? Go out! It was coming from the left. Was it coming from under the bed? He grabbed the bed and flipped it up with ease. There it was. There was a hole for ventilation in the wall, where the bed had been, covered with a metal grate. Seven laid down on his stomach and peered through the grate. He couldn't see anything. It was too dark. Now that he found it, however, there could be no doubt this was the source of the voices. For a moment, he was confused. Why were there children nearby? Then he remembered what the man from Cradle Pharmaceutical had told him. How a ship would take the kidnapped children from the wharf to a waiting passenger liner out in the ocean. Was Seven on that passenger liner? It didn't matter. What mattered was that he found a way to the children. Seven looked at the metal grate. Could he fit through that hole? He stuck his fingers through the grate and grabbed a hold of it. Yeah, how do you like that, you son of a bitch? The dark square sat open before him. Seven wiped the sweat from his forehead and crawled inside. The first section of the duct was small. Seven could do little more than wriggle around on his belly. After a time, however, it got a little larger, and even someone as large as Seven was able to crawl along on his hands and knees. He felt like he'd grown for an inch, like he'd grown from an inchworm to an insect. Not much of an improvement, but it was better than nothing. He'd begun to wonder where the duct would take him when there was a thunderous sound like a massive metal door slamming shut. Then he heard a voice. Warning. Warning. Emergency incineration command has been acknowledged. Automatic incineration will take place in 18 minutes. Please evacuate the incinerator immediately. Repeat. Emergency incineration command has been acknowledged. The voice wasn't harsh, but something about the calm with